Some of us will be back in the fighting and jolly glad of it. Others are doomed to remain in the trenches for the rest of their lives, not the trenches of the front line where they've been strafed by the Hun, but the trenches of physical curtailment where self-pity will launch wave after wave of attack against them. It won't be easy not to get the wind up. It'll be difficult to maintain normal cheerfulness. But they're not the men they were before they went to war. Out there, they've learned something. They're game. They'll remain soldiers, whatever happens. So he's talking about these guys that aren't going to be able to make it back, and he's saying it's going to be hard for them. But he's saying that they're game, and they're going to bring it, because they're going to remain soldiers regardless of what happens. Now, this is a pretty interesting piece where he goes back to New York, where, like I said, he had spent some time there, and he's talking a little bit about what it's like in New York. He says, "There's one person I've missed since my return to New York. I've caught glimpses of him disappearing around corners, but he dodges. I think he's a bit ashamed to meet me. That person is my old civilian self. What a full-blown egoist he used to be. How full of golden plans for his own advancement. How terrified of failure, of disease, of money losses, of death. Of all the temporary, external, non-essential things that have nothing to do with the spirit. War in itself is damnable. It's an extravagant, wasteful use of resources, a misuse of accumulated brain stuff of centuries. Nevertheless, there's many a man who has no love of war, who previous to the war had cramped his soul with littleness and was chased by the bayonet of duty into the blood-stained largeness of the trenches, who has learnt to say, 'Thank God for this war.' He thanks God not because of the carnage, but because when the winepress of new ideals was being trodden, he was born in an age where he could do his share. Often at the front, I have thought of Christ's explanation of his own unassailable peace. An explanation given to his disciples at the Last Supper. Be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. Overcoming the world, as I understand it, is overcoming fear. Fear, in its final analysis, is nothing but selfishness. A man who is afraid in the attack isn't thinking of his pals, and how quickly terror spreads. He isn't thinking of the glory which will accrue to his regiment or division if the attack is a success. He isn't thinking of what he can do to contribute to that success. He isn't thinking of the splendor of forcing his spirit to triumph over weariness and nerves and the abominations that the Huns are chucking at him. He's merely thinking of how he can save his worthless skin and conduct his entirely unimportant body to a place where there aren't any shells. In London, as I saw the workaday, unconscious nobility of the maimed and wounded, the words, "I have overcome the world," took an added depth. All these men have a "I have overcome the world" look in their faces. It is comparatively easy for a soldier with traditions and ideals to get back to face death calmly. To be calm in the face of life, as these chaps are, takes graver courage. what has happened to them? This attitude of mind or greatness of soul, whatever you like to call it, was learnt in the trenches, where everything outward is polluted and damnable. Their experience at the front has given them what in the Army language is known as guts. Guts or courage is an attitude of mind towards calamity, an attitude of mind which makes the honorable accomplishing of duty more permanently satisfying than the preservation of self. Like I said, when I kick this off, this is it's a powerful angle to look at these things. And I have talked about this as well. And I don't know if Sam Harris asked me, I was saying that, hey, war shows you a lot of beauty, and it's where you get to see these incredible capacity of humanity. And he said, yeah, you say that, but I've also heard you describe war as horrible. And, I kind of gave him an answer about, I asked him, I said, hey, if have you ever known anybody that survived cancer? And he said, yes. And I'm like, yeah. And when they survive it, a lot of them say it opened my mind. It freed me from being afraid, and it did all these wonderful things. And I would never wish it on anybody, but they don't wish that it didn't happen either. They learn so much from it. And that's how I feel about war. And that's kind of what I read in a lot of this. Is Dawson saying, look, you are so changed by this, and regardless of the horrors, the change is positive. And it opens your eyes in a way that nothing else can. Back to the book. That's the kind of peep at God we got on the Western Front. It isn't a sad peep either. When men die for something worthwhile, death loses all its terror. It's petering out in bed from sickness or old age that's so horrifying. Many a man whose cowardice is at loggerheads with his sense of duty comes to the front as a non-combatant. He compromises with his conscience and takes a bomb-proof job in some service whose place is well behind the lines. So he's saying, like, okay, a lot of guys, they're like, hey, you know what, I'm kind of scared. I just want to, just give me an easy job. Just, I don't want to get killed. Back to the book, he doesn't stop there long if he's a decent sort. Having learnt more than he ever guessed before about the brutal things that shell fire can do to you, he transfers into a fighting unit. Why? Because danger doesn't appall, it allures. It holds a challenge. It stings one's pride. It urges one to seek out ascending scales of risk just to prove to himself he isn't flabby. And flabby is actually another word that I looked up. There's an old kind of capture what the real meaning is. And there's the definition. Another definition is lacking strength or determination. Now, this is classic. The safe job is the only job for which there's no competition in fighting units. You have to persuade men to be grooms or cooks or batmen. If you're seeking volunteers for a chance at annihilation, you'll have to cast lots to avoid the offense of rejecting. All of this is inexplicable to civilians. And again, this is something I saw with my own two eyes. And I talked about this in my retirement speech in Ramadi, where I was like, okay, we need volunteers. Who wants to go over and live in this hellhole in eastern Ramadi and go out on operations where we're going to be taking casualties? It's going to be a nightmare, and I can promise you nothing but blood, sweat, and tears. If you want to go on that, if you want to go there, not for one operation, but I'm going to put you there for 6 months. So if you want that, put your name on the board. Every single guy does it. Every single guy does it. And that's exactly what he's talking about here. As a matter of fact, I hooked up with this trooper down in New Zealand, jiu-jitsu player, and we were talking. He was in the commandos, in the Royal Marine Commandos, 40 commando, and he was gonna get moved to being a cook. He was got 4-year duty as a cook is what he was gonna get tasked with. and he got out. He got out of the Marines. Got out of the Royal Marines because, you know what? He said, I'm not going to be a cook. You know? I'm a warrior. Yeah. I want to go and get after it. So it's like, you see that in this modern day. You know, I'm talking about how different it was back then, but maybe it wasn't as different as I think it is.
Yeah.
Because we still got troopers that are just willing to step up all the time, and that's one thing that's awesome. You know, again, from my experience in the SEAL teams, you know, when I went in, there was no war going on. I kind of thought that there was, but there wasn't. But these kids that come in now, they know where they're going. They know there's a war going on. They know they're going to get after it, and they're lining up.
I know, man. It's crazy how many people I see, their reason to join is to go fight these bad guys. It's not because I don't have anything better to do or not. No. It's like, I want to quit my job and go fight.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.